I'm here with Dr. Michele Ybarra, who is the president of Internet Solutions for Kids. She's going to tell us a little bit about what's really going on with kids online today. Thank you, Michele, for being here.
Thank you, Amanda, for having me.
What are some of the common misconceptions people have about online victimization?
Well, there are quite a few.
Okay.
One of them is that that there are these shady 40-year-old men that are kind of hiding in the corner, lurking and victimizing all young people. Sometimes the media portrays such danger on the internet that it's hard to not feel like all young people are at risk and are being victimized. But the reality is a little bit different. The majority of young people who are involved in these crimes are not deceived by the adult. The adult is honest that they're above 18, is in most cases honest about their sexual intentions, and in fact, of the kids who then meet the perpetrator offline, 75% of them meet this person again. So it's a very different crime than what...
That's an incredible statistic.
That's right.
So this is happening once there's a first contact. This is happening over and over.
The majority of young people. That's right. That's right. And so it's a different type of crime. It has much more of a... Consensual is not the right legal word because, by definition, these young people can't consent. But it is not against their will. And when we asked young people who had been targeted by this type of experience in the last year who the person was, sometimes it was an adult, but sometimes it was somebody that was of the same age, and sometimes it was somebody they didn't know.
And so that's that very famous statistic, right? The one in
5, which is now 1 in 7.
1 in 7.
Sometimes there's a misperception that what we're talking about is 1 in 7 young people have been approached by an adult to have sex, and that's not what we're talking about.
It's much more, it could be peer.
That's right, it's much more broad.
Okay, I see. Why do you think the media has kind of gotten this all wrong?
Well, partly because we didn't have data for a while. We didn't really know, and it seems to make sense. And I think also because we have this tendency towards a stranger danger sort of attitude. It's such a horrible thing to think that a young person might be victimized, that it must be the really shady, person that's lurking in the corner. But we know, based upon offline victimization data, that young people are much more likely to be physically assaulted and sexually assaulted by people they know than by somebody else they don't know.
Interesting. Now, in your opinion, how can parents make sure their kids are safe online?
If they have some sorts of behaviors that seem to be like they're breaking the rules, just as if they were to go to a party and be drinking, if young people are acting out online, then it's probably time to put in some more strict rules.
So are you recommending parental snooping?
I think that it is dependent on the household and, again, kind of what seems to make sense within that family dynamic. But I think it's also very important to build a relationship of trust with your children, assuming that assuming that their behavior really demonstrates that they should be trusted.
They're ready for it. What children are most at risk for online victimization?
Well, when we look at young people between the ages of 10 and 17, we find that it's really the older young people, so 15 to 17 years of age, are most likely to be reporting unwanted sexual solicitation, targeting, as well as internet harassment. So it's really the older adolescents, which makes sense because they also tend to be much more involved in online communications. And by definition, these are communication type victimizations, so those that are kind of more interactive online and engaging in those types of activities are also more likely to be targeted. When we talk about unwanted sexual solicitation specifically, girls are much more likely than boys to report being targeted, which is consistent with offline sexual victimization as well. For victims of internet harassment, sometimes we see higher rates of depressive symptomatology, and of instigators of internet harassment, sometimes we see higher rates of aggressive behavior, rule-breaking behavior.
So it's kind of all following the same pattern in that, if you're having problems offline, you're probably going to be having problems online, and the internet is just another kind of playground.
It's really very much just one more environment.
Yeah.
And so that just as you need to know where your child is and who they're with and what they're doing after school or at the mall or with, at a party, you need to know who they're with, what they're doing, what they're talking about on the internet.
What other issues are kids combating online?
Well, certainly one of the biggest issues that is top of mind for legislatures and researchers and other people kind of concerned about the health of young people are social networking sites, so MySpace, Facebook, and kind of what it means for a young person to have a profile on one of these websites in terms of their vulnerability to victimization, but also even much more sort of, we'll say, mainstream activities like getting into college or being offered a job based upon what you have on your profile. Sometimes it can be used against you in ways that you may not even anticipated.
So what's next for you? What are you researching next in Internet Solutions for Kids?
Well, we are going to be following the young people that we talk to, the 1,600 young people, for a couple more years to kind of begin to better understand what's happening first and what's happening second.
What do you mean by that?
So, for example, we talked about how sometimes targets of internet harassment report depressive symptomatology. Well, we don't know if that's because once they're harassed, they then have elevated symptoms of depression, or is it perhaps that young people with elevated symptoms of depression are more vulnerable to internet harassment? So really kind of beginning to understand what is happening first and what is
Chicken
happening
or the
second.
egg.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.